Hello. The Divine Code reading for September 24th, pages 217 and 218. We're in the chapter Aspects of Idolatry from which benefit is allowed and Nullification of Idols. Continuing in topic 11. If a building was constructed for purposes other than idolatry, and it was later plastered for the purpose of becoming an idol, or if idols were later attached onto it so the entire building could be bowed down to, or if an addition was made that was bowed down to, then all that was added to convert it into an idol should be removed and destroyed, but the rest of the original non-idolatrous building is permitted. If one removed only a significant part of the idolatrous addition after the fact, the rest is permitted, since by doing so its connection to being worshipped was nullified. See Shach and Taz Yeridea 145:3 that it is sufficient even for those idolaters themselves, and therefore it applies to other Gentiles as well, as explained in topic 13. That's later in today's reading. So a building exists. It's a regular building. Additions to the building were made for the purpose of idol worship, sort of turning the building into an idol by this method or that method, by plastering, by attaching images, or by attaching an addition. Once those additions are damaged to the extent that it's no longer usable for idol worship, then the rest of the building would revert to its status of being just a regular building, and we would be permitted for benefit. A house into which an actual idol has been brought is forbidden until the idol is nullified. If the house was dedicated for the service of that idol, so the house, it's a regular house, a regular building. The idol was brought into the building. It doesn't say it's attached here, just brought into the building for the sake of being used as a house of idol worship. Becomes a house of idol worship. If the idol is nullified, and I would assume if it's removed, then the house reverts back to its original status, being just a regular building. But if an actual idol was brought in only temporarily, or if it was brought into the house but the house was not dedicated for its service, the house is forbidden only as long as the idol is found inside the house. Clearly, this applies to private homes, as was mentioned earlier. It's referring to a private property where the owner is making the decision one way or another concerning the idol. However, minor children of idol worshippers are obviously exempt from this prohibition to live in their parents' home when the idols are there. The prohibition does not apply if a building needs to be entered for the purpose of healing. For example, a hospital that contains idols. So family members that don't really have a choice, especially children, don't have a choice. The children are allowed to use the building if it's their family house, and someone brings an idol into the family. The parents bring an idol into the family house. The children are still allowed to use the building for benefit because it's their house, or if it's a hospital or something of that nature that, you know, because it's used for other purposes, the people need it for those purposes. The idol does not prevent people from using it. The house is not necessarily being used as, wasn't dedicated as a house of idolatry, but rather it's a house that has an idol in it. It's a different status. So a building that has an idol in it, it's still permitted, although it would be preferable not to use the building, but it's permitted to use the building in that case. Once the idol has been removed, the house may again be used. Shokin Orach Yeridea 145.3. This can be noted from Genesis 24:31. I have cleaned the house. Rashi explains, based on Midrash Bereshit Rabbah there, that's on Genesis 24:31, that Laban cleared his father's house from idols before Eleazar, the righteous servant of Abraham, arrived there. This implies that Laban understood that Eleazar observed the prohibition to enter a house that had idols in it. So Laban's house had idols in it. That would be Ritva's father had idols in his house. And Eleazar, being a pious non-Jew, would not want to enter the house until the idols were removed. And once the idols were removed, then Eleazar was able to enter. That's Abraham's servant was allowed to enter the house after the idols were removed. Topic number 12. A stone that had been hewn for idolatrous purposes is forbidden for benefit. So a stone is different from a rock. Stone is what's been cut away from a rock. So we have a stone that's cut to certain dimensions, cut by human effort, as opposed to a rock that is a natural object. The stone is a human-created object. So if it's created, if it's made for the purpose of idol worship, you know, they say, okay, we need to make the stone for whatever purpose for the idol, then the stone is prohibited for benefit because it was made for that purpose. If, after having been hewn, after having been cut, one nullifies it by damaging it. So if you got a stone and someone comes along and damages the stone, it's no longer the same kind of stone, and therefore it could be nullified and permitted for benefit. If after having been hewn, it was sculpted or tiled for the sake of being worshipped, then even if its sculpted or tiled parts were in the very body of the stone, these parts are forbidden for benefit because they were made for idolatry. So the stone is chiseled away, or something is attached to it that is for the purpose of idolatry or turning it into an idol. People take the stone and sculpt it, stone sculptures. Then it would be forbidden for benefit in that manner. If someone removed the parts that had been added for idol worship, the parts that have been added for idol worship, in order to damage and therefore nullify it, the stone becomes permitted. So the stone, it's originally a rock sitting in the ground. It's cut for the sake of the idol worship. It's cut out into a stone object for the sake of the idol worship. Something is added to it or it's sculpted. That means it's carved. The stone is carved into an object for idol worship. Once those, either the sculpture is damaged, or if the tiles, the additions to it are removed, then the stone goes back to being just an ordinary object and is permitted for benefit. A stone that an idolater Shokanoric Uridea 145.4 and Shak Uridea 145.17. A stone that an idolater set up to place an idol upon. So now it's being used as a pillar that the idol, or a base for the idol. It's forbidden for derived benefit from, since it was dedicated as a base for the idol and was set, if it was set up only temporarily. It may not be used so long as the idol is standing upon it, but once the idol has been removed, the stone is again permitted for benefit. Shokanoric Uridea 145.5 and Shak Uridea 145.18. So the stone is being used. If the stone is being used as a base, the idol is placed on top of it. If it was dedicated as a long-term, a permanent base, then it would have to be nullified by being damaged in some way. You know, someone had to break the stone in half or something. If it was only being used temporarily, you know, they weren't planning to use the stone all the time, but it was only be temporary. Then once the statue is taken away, then it's no longer on the status of being prohibited. It becomes permitted for use if it was a temporary base, not a permanent base. Topic 13. An object that was formerly an idol, belonging to a Gentile, is permitted for benefit. The status of the idol has been nullified. Any Gentile can fully nullify an idol for any other Gentile. Whether it belongs to him or any other person, even if he is compelled to do so against his own will. So a non-Jew has the capacity to nullify the status, to change the status away from being an idolatrous status to being a non-idolatrous status, away from being prohibited for benefit to being permitted for benefit. A non-Jew has the capacity to do that, even if it's being done against his own will. Still, it accomplishes the purpose. Even if one Gentile serves one idol, like Peor, the second Gentile serves a different idol, like Merculus. Each is able to nullify the idol of the other. So here we're talking about two idol worshippers. They worship different idols, but because they're in the status of idol worshiper, then they have the ability to nullify each other's statues. It doesn't have to be a person from that particular religion. It can be a person from another religion. As long, yeah. If the one who nullifies an idol's status must recognize the meaning of idol worship. Therefore, a Gentile child or a significantly mentally deficient person cannot nullify an idol. The qualifications for legal majority or responsibility regarding Noahide commandments are discussed in Part 1, Topic 4, Chapter 4, Topic 4. The practical ruling is that legal majority begins at age 12 for a girl, age 13 for a boy. Part 1, Chapter 4, Topic 5 covers rules for exemption due to mental deficiency. So a person, in order to do this, has to be of a status where they're able to understand what idolatry is in order to be able to nullify the idol. They have to have some comprehension of what they're doing. Rambam, the laws of the worship of stars and idols. I'm sorry, this one is. Yes, Rambam, the laws of the stars of worship of the stars of worship and idols. 8, 9, Shulchan Aruch Yeridea, chapter 146. That's discussing the ability of the person to understand what an idol worship is. Even the nullification performed by a righteous Gentile who faithfully observes the Noahide code is acceptable. So does it make a difference? Here, the basic halakha being presented in the divine code is that even a righteous non-Jew, a righteous Gentile who's following the Noahide code, therefore he's not involved in idol worship. Would he have a status of a child, or say it nicely, a status of one that's mentally deficient? He doesn't. He's not connected to idolatry. Therefore, can he nullify statues? And the basic halakha, according to the divine code, is that he is. A long footnote on this. Even though it is explained by Rambam and Shulchan Aruch that one who does not worship or submit himself to an idol cannot nullify it. It appears that this refers specifically to nullification that makes it permitted for a Jew. However, it becomes permitted for a Gentile even if the person who nullifies the idol was not an idol worshiper. So for the purpose of nullification for a Jew, it's a much stricter standard. In order for a Jew to benefit from the nullified object, whether it's an idol or a stone that the idol stood upon or something to that effect, for a Jew, it's a higher standard as to what can be, how it can be nullified. It has to be nullified by a Gentile who's an idol worshiper. And that's where the halakhas are stricter in this regard. The question here is, how does it become permitted for a non-Jew to benefit? Would that have to be done by an idol worshiper, or can a non-idol worshiper do this? This can be derived from Haggadot Ashrei Avodah Zarah, chapter 4. In the name of Rashi and other Rishonim, as rabbinical authorities from 1000 to 1500 Common Era, that all of these disqualifications of the nullification of idols by certain Gentiles, meaning cases where it was stated that an idol does not become nullified, were enacted by the sages, who decreed that those Gentiles, for example, followers of the Noahide code, cannot nullify the idol to make it permissible for a Jew. But based on the Torah law itself, an idol can be nullified by persons if the sages disqualified for nullifying idols. So surely these persons can nullify idols to make them permissible for use by Gentiles. So the basic Torah law, the way it's presented in the Torah, is that a Gentile, even a non-idolatrous Gentile, is able to nullify idols for use by other Gentiles. Where it's more stricter for the Jews is not a Torah, but rather it's rabbinic additions. It's an enactment by the sages. So it's a rabbinic extra fence for the sake of the Jewish people, that not to use this kind of nullification by a pious non-Jew. A non-idolatrous non-Jew is not able to nullify an idol for Jews. Is rabbinic upon the Jew, and it doesn't actually affect whether or not a Gentile can nullify an idol for another Gentile. See Tractate of Avodah 44a. Hittite came and nullified the precious crown of Ammon, which was an idol. Itti was a friend of David, and it's not logical that he would serve idols. So Itti would be a pious non-Jew. He did not serve idols, and he was able to nullify an idol for his friend King David. Now, this would have been before the rabbinic enactment. That would have disqualified it. So on a basic biblical level, it would be allowed even for a Jew. Rather, he was a ger teshav, a Gentile resident of the Holy Land, who had declared before a Jewish court that he would faithfully observe the Noahide commandments. Nevertheless, he nullified the idols of the Philistines and the Ammonites, as explained there. Even if one would say that he was still an idol worshiper during the story of the wood of the Philistines, he surely was not serving idols in the second episode of Ammon. That's in Samuel 2, chapters 5 and 12. Rather, we must say that from the Torah law itself, any Gentile can nullify any idol, even if he doesn't serve it, especially if he is familiar with its ways. And although the sages decreed that it cannot be nullified by a righteous Gentile who has resolved to worship only God, we can say that the sages did not extend this decree in the case of significant need. For example, for the sake of a Jewish king, in this case, David. Now, David would have been prior to what we normally refer to as the sages. The sages might be of the time of the Second Temple. David was prior to the First Temple, so whether or not the rabbinic decree would have applied at this time, it's unclear. But even if it did apply, it would not. Because it's a rabbinic decree, there's opportunities for allowing allowances for in cases of need. If when a rabbinic decree goes into effect, it's for offense, it's for a benefit. If it becomes difficult to follow the rabbinic decree, then it's possible that a court could say allow an allowance to not follow the rabbinic decree at that point. This is consistent with the fact that, for the sake of the needs of Jewish kings, the sages set aside other rabbinic decrees that they had placed upon Jews in general. As explained in Tractate Barakot, chapter 3, although Rashi on Tractate Kedushim 76b comments that Itti was an idol worshiper, which implies that he actually served idols. It is possible that he means Itti was previously an idol worshiper, and therefore he had the ability to nullify an idol for any Jew, even though Itti, no longer served idols. So simply, the possibility with regard to Rashi, who would be more stricter in this regard, saying that Itti was an idolater. Well, what that means is that he was familiar with idolatry. He had an awareness of it, and because he had an awareness of it, he was able to affect the nullification. Now, a person that grew up as a ger teshav and had no awareness of idolatry, that might be more difficult. You know, we call it the son of the maidservant. If he grew up in a Jewish household, or if he grew up in Israel, then he doesn't have any connection with idol worship. So perhaps that's where the rabbinic decree is referring to, and would not be referring necessarily to Ithi, who are maybe like Jethro from the father-in-law of Moses, who served idols but then stopped serving idols. A person of that status might still be able to nullify the idols, or maybe even the son of the maidservant might be able to. That's something that would have to be looked into more closely. But that looks more deeply into that. So just regular pious non-Jew, the person who's studying the divine code, who used to be involved in other religions, would have the ability to nullify an idol, at least for other Gentiles, and in times of need would have the ability to nullify an idol for a Jew. Thank you.